2024 is winding down. We had our final roster for the year, the third window for Mauricio Pochettino, and we'll get into all those details here. I will start off by saying the roster was announced Sunday early morning, or at least here on the West Coast, regular morning for the rest of you. 4 days before the United States was to play Jamaica on Thursday down at the office in Kingston. So I would imagine the players were alerted a few days earlier, so they knew about joining Mauricio Pochettino Orlando for camp before heading off to Jamaica. And that's fine. We were told, I reached out to US Soccer, and they said they wanted to wait till Sunday where Mauricio Pochettino could address the media and talk about the roster, which makes sense, I suppose. I mean, if you announce the roster, you want Pochettino to do it. But if this manager is alert and available, you should do it early in the week. That's just my opinion. Because now, maybe it doesn't matter. This gets buried. Nobody cares. Maybe a few of you that are tuning in to hear me break down the roster here and whomever else is involved. But no, U.S. Soccer is on the bottom rung of interest now with MLS, NFL, the European leagues, everything. Mauricio Pochettino's created some fanfare and excitement, but not nearly enough for a program that it's going to pick up as we get closer to the World Cup, and it's all right to wait for that moment, but we know we need to build. And if the United States go down to Kingston, which they don't, they have a very good record down in Jamaica, and they have a very good record against Jamaica in general. I think 7 straight wins. The last competitive game was the Nations League last year. They won that in the semifinals in extra time. So they have a good record, but Jamaica's improving, got a new manager in Steve McLaren, got some really good European-based players. That's a tricky pace to play, and it's the first time Mauricio Pochettino's doing that. So if we lose to Jamaica, any excitement Mauricio Pochettino has created is gone. If we don't make the Nations League semifinals, which is not out of the realm of possibility, we've won 3 straight Nation League championships trophies, and that'll be in March of 2025. We're going to get past Jamaica, and you can't have like a 2-goal loss down there. You get my drift? Because you could miss the showpiece event in March in SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. I want to be there, so come on, USA, let's do it. So we'll break down the roster. We're not going to dwell too much on that, but we all know it. U.S. Soccer, nobody cares right now. Nobody cares. The Mauricio Pochettino news has subsided. I hope that I'm not discouraging you for joining us here for the videos, because we're doing the Lord's work. We're keeping it up. We want to create some enthusiasm. Hopefully they go down to Jamaica. Some interesting returns on this roster from a very long injury list, which is getting a little bit shorter. We'll go through the roster and what we can project and some of the things that Pochettino talked about that I think we should really clue into on how this team is going to look as we get into 2025. We'll do all of that here on the Soccer OG. Haven't been on the podcast as of late, but we're bringing it back. But go check out the library and go listen to some of the past podcasts. And like and subscribe us here. Hit that like button. Hit it. Got a lot of exciting things around here for the brand, the Soccer OG. So, 25-player roster. There's some of the highlights. Now, when I look at the roster, we remember there was a September roster, there was an October roster. There was some consulting being done for Mauricio Pochettino about the player base, who would be considered for the United States. He has said some things that would suggest new players might be coming in at 2025. But once we're into 2025, the World Cup is right around the corner, if you can believe it. So if he got consulted to pick this group of players, hasn't really budged from the 3 camps, then I don't know if too many new faces are going to be introduced. Maybe he likes this group. Maybe he thinks he can build them. Maybe he has spent enough time with them to know this is the squad he is going to run with. We'll talk about dual nationals, but he said something very telling about them that may discourage guys that are on the fence for representing the United States. So we look at this again, 4 goalkeepers. Zach Steffen's the big beneficiary out of this because he hasn't been playing well, hasn't got good stats, but Mauricio Pochettino likes him enough. Now, Matt Turner's been the starter. The backup has been Patrick Schulte. And Diego Cochin is also there, one for the future. He's not going to see action. But I don't think anyone's going to argue that he is our best prospect by far these days. So good to have him there. Defenders, Chris Richards is back. He made the bench for Crystal Palace. He's not going to start, but he is there. And then you have a similar group. Tim Ream looks like he's into the plans. Austin Trusty, Miles Robinson, Mark McKenzie. Just two fullbacks, which I will talk about here in a moment because I think that's a big story as well. Brendan Aaronson's been great as a midfielder. He gets in there with Gianluca Busio. Johnny Cardoso returns. Weston McKennie's back. I think he'll be thrown into the deep end, so he's healthy. Great news. Aiden Morris, Yunus Musa, Tanner Tessman, Malik Tillman. Cade Cowell makes the roster, and we'll talk about the guys that aren't available up front. Ricardo Pepi, Christian Pulisic, Brandon Vasquez, Timothy Weah, who also returns. He'll be suspended for the first game, and Alejandro Sendejas. So, the talking points there. I think goalkeeper's pretty self-explanatory. Let's go group from group. Fullbacks. He brought two. Obviously, we're still waiting for Serginho Dest. You have Anthony Robinson and Joe Scally. So Joe Scally is a big winner here. Joe Scally looks like Pochettino says, that's my right back. I like him. I'm going to work with him. So much so that Christopher Lund and Marlon Fossey, the other backups in the October camp, are not called in. I don't think that's good news for either one of those two. And Pochettino also mentioned that some of the center backs he's brought in have shown that they could play out wide. He mentioned Tim Ream specifically because he got to see that Orlando-Charlotte MLS playoff game. He said Tim Ream can play out wide, so Tim Ream seems to be in the plans. Austin Trusty is a guy who has played out wide as well, so maybe he could fill that. I don't know if this is a mandate on the state of our fullbacks, but if you're Marlon Fossey or Christopher Lund or John Tolkien or DeJuan Jones or anyone else, not great news for you. And maybe this is a philosophy about using fullbacks, which Mauricio Pochettino clearly doesn't prioritize. It's his vision. We are standing by with it. The engine room, the number sixes. Tyler Adams got back, played with Bournemouth this weekend, wasn't brought in. Not going to dwell on that either. He wants to give him a little more time. Tyler Adams is going to be a big part of this. But another opportunity for Johnny Cardoso. And Yunus Musa, who was very happy about what he really wasn't in that position. Or Tanner Tessman's a guy who could benefit. Aiden Morris. Aiden Morris is a guy that was brought in at the back end of the Greg Berhalter era and has made every camp here for Pochettino and has seen some significant action. He's a guy Pochettino clearly likes. I like him too, so the more the merrier. But I think the winners in the midfield are certainly Cardoso and Aiden Morris, and then Yunus Musa, because he was mentioned by name that he's going to be used, and Brendan Aaronson's been in great form at Leeds United. Let's get into these strikers. The big winners are the Liga MX players, or not the strikers, the forwards. And Folarin Balogun is injured. Josh Sargent's injured. Haji Wright picked up an injury over the weekend, so all those guys are out. They would have all probably been in if healthy, although I'm starting to really fade on Josh Sargent because it's just there's never a payoff on the international stage. Johnny Cardoso's another guy we're waiting on. Chris Richards is another guy we're waiting on to get a payoff in the international stage. And if they don't play well, they play well for their clubs, but they don't play well for country, I'm sorry. Next man up. And Josh Sargent is really the head of the class for that. So Cade Cowell and the Liga MX season wrapping up. They're going to playoffs. Played well. Alejandro Sendejas showed something good in that Mexico game, one of the few bright spots. He can benefit there. And Brandon Vasquez, by essentially the backup to, it's going to be Ricardo Pepi, who's going to start, who was also mentioned, is going to be under a close watch by Mauricio Pochettino. Great opportunity for Pepi, but on the flip side, if he doesn't deliver here, he might go down the pecking order. Brandon Vasquez also would like to get a chance, but he is going to be second fiddle here. I don't think Cade Cowell's going to play. Tim Weah is there. I have been seeing Tim Weah, if you look at the goals he has scored, and again, he can't play that first game, still suspended from Copa America. He scored his goals in those middle channels as a 9. So maybe there is a possibility that he can play in that area. But that is a position when healthy we have a lot of depth in. So it's good. There's 9 players that were in the Champions League that are on this roster. There are 20 players that were on the October camp that are back here in November. Many of the new ones were injured before. And there it is. Not a really surprising group. We don't have that blockbuster dual national. We don't have a young player on the horizon. There are some good ones like Cole Campbell that you would like to sort of follow that transition that a Christian Pulisic. We don't really have that young player that's getting us all excited. I guess you could say Kevin Sullivan, but he's nowhere near ready. He's 15. So this is it. These are the key pieces. It's not going to change between now and 2026. With regards to the dual nationals, there are a couple there that would certainly boost this program. But Mauricio Pochettino had this to say: players need to have desperation to make national team. And he compared it like a day-to-day job. He wants to have these guys. He compared it to the Argentine national team where, the old Bill Shankly quote. He didn't use it, but, football is not a matter of life and death. It's much more serious than that. And that's a cultural thing that Argentina has and England has and Brazil has. The USA doesn't have it. He wants to build that. And, well, he can't build it before 2026. This is something that we have to build culturally, and it will take decades to have a program that the players would literally die to represent their national team. And I don't know what that looks like. But I just know in Argentina and Brazil, when they get the call up, they go, where do you want me? How soon? There's no, I don't know. I'm not feeling 100%. No, they will go through a brick wall to play for the national team. He played for the Argentine national team. He used that as an example, so he knows it well. We're not that. And I don't think we'll ever be that. And we're certainly, if we can, we're not going to be there by the time his tenure is over, which from what we understand is 2026. So he also said that because the dual nationals that we're talking about, they're juggling other countries. That's going to rule them out based on what he said. He goes, no, I want to hear from you that this is where you want to be. There's not this or that. You've got to tell Mauricio Pochettino, I want to play for this team. I want to represent the United States. I'll do anything to do it. So by saying that, the dual nationals, by and large, may have been wiped off the board. Maybe not. And we will see, because it depends on what these players say. And then the other thing is about building this culture, which I just don't think we can possibly do. He also said, he doesn't want to convince players to join the U.S. They have to be desperate to play here. After this camp, he also added, the most important thing is to have a review after this camp, what we need to improve. So I like that, because I still want to see some changes here. I want to see us find those players that have that fire in the belly and are desperate to play for the United States. So it sounds like he's using this one, and then we have the January camp, which is going to be MLS players, and he shot across the bow to MLS to say, make sure those players are available. Whatever you call January camp cupcake, it's Mauricio Pochettino. I think every player that is eligible, MLS players, and it's going to be based in Miami, are going to want to be part of that. So that is that next cycle that we'll start building up for Mauricio Pochettino. So the process I'm okay with. I'm okay with the messaging, but I don't think we can meet those standards set by a Pochettino. And I'm all right with the roster. I'm not sitting here, so-and-so should have made it. I think there's one thing about getting an experienced keeper like Brad Guzan, who was electric for Atlanta United in that upset of Lionel Messi and Inter Miami in the MLS Cup playoffs, which has everyone talking about the MLS Cup playoffs. So, by the way, if you're out there saying that this is a disaster for MLS, how could you call something that everyone all over the world is talking about a disaster? So we'll leave that for another discussion. I think there are some players that can seize this. But as we prepare for these games, I'm worried about that Jamaica game. I don't know how Mauricio Pochettino is going to react because he's never experienced anything like this. As a coach, coaching top European clubs, there is nothing that can prepare you for a hard surface down in Kingston with stakes. This is the first really important game. The United States, if they don't make those Nation League semifinals after they've won the last three, that would be a disaster. That is a tournament the U.S. has to make because in March of 2025, you can point to that in Los Angeles, in the bright lights, and say, here, and by the way, Mauricio Pochettino in LA, what a great opportunity. PR, media rounds, everything. And that's why it's probably in LA. But you got to qualify. And Jamaica's not just going to lie down and let you. And I'm a little bit nervous about it. It's a tough game. There could be easier games to play, and there are for some of the other teams like Canada, Mexico, and Panama, who would be favored to make the Final Four there in Los Angeles. So hopefully we have the squad. We should have the squad. We should have the leadership. But as we know, anything can happen in CONCACAF. Now, if Mauricio Pochettino goes down there and wins 3-1 or 2-0, clean, we got something brewing. We got something brewing. So we will accentuate the positive. I just didn't like what I saw in the Mexico game. We got to work on some positions. And hopefully the guys like Cardoso and Weston McKennie and eventually Tim Weah can fill the gaps that we were showing in previous camps. The Soccer OG. Check out the Soccer OG podcast where you get all your podcasts. Like and subscribe us here. We will talk a little bit more about this game before it arrives Thursday, and we'll recap it and get ready for the second leg in St. Louis the following Monday. Everyone, enjoy your day or your week.